Wherever you fish, whether it's the bank, the John boat, the kayak, or anything in between, there is an awesome time period going on right now called the pre-spawn, and you can take advantage of it to catch more bass than ever before. But what the heck is the pre-spawn? How do I know if the body of water I fish is in the pre-spawn or not? And what are the best lures to throw to take advantage of this time period? My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it.
Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all.
I can't believe what I just caught.
Yes!
The pre-spawn is a short time period between full-blown winter and full-blown spring, where in winter, the fish weren't really feeding up a whole lot, and if they're on the banks making their nests, what's called spawning, they're not eating at all. So that means they have to eat something in the meantime. That is the pre-spawn. So let's talk about the top 5 lures to catch bass in the pre-spawn, regardless of where you fish, pond or lake, starting with lure number 5, and that is the Big Blade spinnerbait. The single blade Colorado spinnerbait is fantastic as that water starts to get a little bit warmer, but still is cold in the 40s and 50s. The bass will start moving shallower, getting ready to spawn, but I say shallower and not shallow. The bass may not be in 3 to 5 feet of water, they may be in 5 to 10, and so a lot of reaction baits have trouble staying down in that water depth. But a big, heavy, single Colorado blade spinnerbait, slow rolled across the bottom, retrieved extra slow, can trigger those bass that want to feed up, but just aren't quite in the shallow water yet. Now, why a single blade instead of 2 blades like most spinnerbaits have? Well, I'm gonna discuss this in way more detail in a future video coming out, but the single blade serves 2 main purposes. The one big blade it has creates a ton of low frequency vibration in the water, as opposed to high frequency with blades that spin a whole lot faster. It's more of a thump, 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 thump. And by putting a swim bait trailer on the back, I don't do this all the time, but especially in the pre-spawn I do, it helps the fish to really key in on where the hooks are and not have the possibility of eating the blades. The fish in the pre-spawn almost always choke this thing and it catches big ones. This category of spinnerbait excels around dirty to stained water and does incredibly well around hard pieces of structure and cover. So deeper dock pilings, brush piles, stumps, maybe some new fresh aquatic vegetation. If you just cast this thing out there, let it sink to the bottom and slowly retrieve it back to you, you're gonna get some big bites. When it comes to colors though, which ones do you need? In my opinion, the only colors you need in the pre-spawn are bait fish colors. And like I said, you're fishing this majority of the time in dirtier water, so adding in some chartreuse, some red, some orange can definitely trigger a bite and help a fish find it in that dirtier water. But most of the time, that big thumping Colorado blade, that number 5 or number 6 size, is gonna draw those fish in from a few feet away and they're gonna annihilate this thing. And I'm gonna say it again, slowly retrieving this thing is the best way to go. You can burn it, but the more you burn it, the more it tends to turn over on its side. So this thing is meant, like I said, for the water temperature in the 40s to 50s. As that winter is just getting out of here into springtime, the big Colorado blade spinnerbait can excel. Now, speaking of hard cover, number 4 on my list is the old-fashioned jig. If you've been smashing them on the big Colorado spinnerbait, slow on the bottom, next to stumps, next to trees, and then all of a sudden the next day, the fish just aren't biting that anymore, it's still possible the fish are there, they're just not gonna bite a moving bait, and so the jig is the best way to go. A jig works in any water clarity, but stained is definitely best in my opinion. And the only 2 colors you need for this time period are green pumpkin, watermelon variations in clear water, and black and blue in dirty water. This next point though is going to be totally subjective, it's my own opinion, but I think a jig is a much better pre-spawn lure in any situation, ponds, lakes, rivers, than a soft plastic is, and here's why. A jig is super versatile. It can be flipped to a piece of cover or structure on one cast, and then the very next cast can be swam back to you. A soft plastic, unless it has a heavy weight to it, can't be as versatile. Jigs also happen to disturb the bottom more as you retrieve them, and I have found that especially as those fish get up to spawn to make their nests, they don't like the bottom being disturbed. That doesn't usually trigger a bite for them. A soft plastic though, rigged weightless or a very light weight that is drug across their spawning spawning area does trigger a bite. So if it's pre-spawn, I'm sticking with a jig 99% of the time. And pre-spawn is the best time of the year to catch the biggest bass of your life because the majority of big fish are at least somewhat shallow. And so if a jig gets bigger than average bites, why not double your chances by throwing a big bass catcher during the big bass season? Now, moving on to lure number 3 on my list, we have one that is super versatile for every type of angler, and that is a soft plastic swim bait. The soft plastic swim bait is fantastic in water that is 60 to 70 degrees as those fish are leaving the full-blown pre-spawn and getting ready to spawn. They are in shallow water, they are cruising around, getting ready to find their mate and make their nest. The soft plastic swim bait is a weedless presentation, therefore can be thrown way shallower and in much more sticky, snaggy cover than any other lure on this list, which makes it very effective in ponds and lakes. It is great in stained and clear water, but like I said, works super well around shallow grass lines, grass flats, shallow bushes and trees, skipping underneath docks. This thing being weedless can be thrown anywhere. The only 2 colors you need for this swim bait are shad variations and watermelon or green pumpkin. As the water is colder, stick to more shad as the bait fish in the wintertime have been eating shad, they're used to it. But as it gets closer to the spawn, the bluegills start eating the bass's eggs off their nest, so they're extra defensive to colors that are like watermelon and green pumpkin, your natural colors. So warmer water, throw your watermelon swim baits, colder water, throw your shad swim baits. But the biggest thing about this soft plastic is that it excels around the slimy, nasty grass that starts growing as soon as your water temperature rises. This problem is especially prevalent in ponds where jigs, spinnerbaits, crankbaits, vibrating jigs, basically any lures that aren't weightless soft plastics have a hard time getting through that slime. And if you've got slime on your lure, you're probably not catching a bass. So a swim bait like this, retrieved high in the water column, even in shallow water, is pretty resistant to getting that nasty slime on your lure, therefore ruining your cast. So that's one of the biggest perks of this category. Chugging along to number 2 on my list, I catch a ton of bass. It is my second most productive lure in the pre-spawn, and it should be no surprise here for most anglers, it is a vibrating jig. The old vibrating jig, or chatterbait as the Kleenex name is, really succeeds in, I would say any water temperature, but especially temperatures in the 50s and 60s. You know, as bass start their movement from deep water to shallow water, from winter to spring, the best place to throw a vibrating jig is around aquatic vegetation. So focus your vibrating jig on those deeper edges, deeper grass lines as the water gets warmer from winter, and as the water keeps warming up into the pre-spawn and spawn time period, focus on those shallower grass lines. Again, start deep with these things and work your way shallower as that water temperature increases. The vibrating jig is probably the most effective lure for covering water in every water depth, from 10 feet of water and shallower in the entire pre-spawn, and you need one in your tackle box. Now, let's talk about colors. Which ones do you need? In my opinion, the only 2 colors you truly need until at least the post-spawn are red for your colder water conditions and green pumpkin for when those fish get closer to the spawn. And when it comes to the retrieve, you want to reel this thing as slow as you can while still keeping that blade vibrating back and forth as the water is cold. And as that water warms up, not only do you move shallower to shallower cover, shallower grass, but you also can retrieve your lure a little bit faster. If you're not sure what the bass want on a specific day, start fast and move slow. And finally, lure number 1 on my list for pre-spawn fishing is my absolute favorite. It works everywhere and catches giant bass, and that is the one that's been in front of you the entire time, the Strike King Hybrid Hunter. I believe this crankbait right here is better than any other shallow diving crankbait in the pre-spawn because it is loud, it is aggressive, it hunts left and right. In my experience, it is better than a lipless crankbait around shallow aquatic vegetation, and it's better around rocks and wood than a flat-sided crankbait or a square bill crankbait. This thing is an absolute workhorse for me, and like I said, it catches giants. It caught me a 10-pounder last year. Now, what makes this lure so special that it would land at number 1 on my list? Well, to find that out, you're gonna have to watch watch my Hybrid Hunter Masterclass video, which I have linked right over here in the corner. If you want to catch more pre-spawn bass than ever before in your ponds and lakes, you need to watch that video because the Hybrid Hunter is a special lure, and I go over every detail you could possibly ever need to know about this lure right there. So my name's Tyler. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions, and I'll see you in that video.